That's the sound of a Sierra Nevada hot bullet. Plug. Welcome to Black Sheep and Bad Apples, the podcast that more or less podcasts sober, but we get very drunk during our commercials.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm the host, Lauren O'Brien.
He wasn't even here early.
We got Mr. Sam Mitt.
Yo, what up? What up, fam?
Senor Joe Dacey.
Howdy, howdy.
And our co-host takeover for tonight, is Shawn, the producer Hill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how you doing, baby?
I'm doing pretty good.
He's like our doctor.
Feeling all right.
Yeah, he's our Dr. Dre. He's coming in to get featured on the podcast.
Yeah. That's I'm a
Not
fe-
Dr. Dre, Shawn. Let's just
Yeah,
get that
Shawn,
clear right on.
yeah. Dre.
No, he might be in later. We
Dre,
put
if
in a
you want to
call.
come
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
we would really
yeah.
appreciate
Yeah,
the,
he gave me like a stern maybe.
Yeah,
So
we're
like,
not
Black
gonna
Sheep
say
and Bad
no,
Apples
will we?
feature, and that's how you got to label
Yeah,
featuring Dr. Dre.
Yeah, we're gonna have to
Dre.
put that in the title
Not
of the
guest
episode.
Real
appearance,
Dr.
not
Dre.
it's
No.
featuring always.
Featuring
with hip-hop
Dr. Dre.
artists.
What we gotta
So-
do is featuring
Can I-
Dr. Dre.
can
and
I do
have your
that
name
tonight?
be featuring Dr. Dre.
Can you feature
But
Dr.
that would-
Dre?
No, I mean Black Sheep and Bad Apples featuring Shawn Hill as host.
I mean, I think we should do,
Ooh,
and I
alright.
think we did do that. Because
Alright,
last week we had Dacey, and it's featuring
Ooh.
Joe Dacey, is it not?
featuring Dacey.
Featuring
yeah.
Dacey, yeah.
I
I
like
was
that. That's got a ring to it too.
I like it. Wow.
Featuring Joe Dacey. Sounds like a punk band. You want me to do my new punk band?
Featuring Daisy.
Featuring Dacey.
He's
Oh,
not
I
going to
would
be
be
on
in
the
that
first
band.
three
I
albums,
would be in
though,
that
keep in
band.
mind.
So he's not going to be on it?
On the first three albums. He only starts being introduced on the fourth album, and that's when all the popularity.
Yeah, because we pretend that like he hasn't heard of us for 3 years, or the first three albums.
He's like, these guys are so good, I just had to get on with it.
Yeah,
And
he's
they're like, who is that
"I'm a
dude?
fucking killer. I can sing like a motherfucker.
Like, you
Let me
haven't
be your
heard of
lead
Dacey?"
singer."
The only time I was in a band was this band, The Flops, and I would put on a ski mask and stand in front of the drum set so no one would run into the drum set.
Oh, that's
Knowing
fun.
the audience or knowing the
Yeah.
the
A little bit of both.
I played a Battle of the Bands once where the requirement to be considered a band when you entered for it is you had to have at least 3 people, members. And we had a couple friends that they just made beats and hip hopped over them and stuff. But it was like, I don't know what I want. Like early 2020s EDM, poetic, hip hoppy, kind of EDM-y. You know, it was real experimental and stuff, but they only had the 2 of them. And so they got one of their friends to just put on a bear costume, and he just literally danced on the stage as a bear the whole time to their music and was just like a hype bear. But that's how they were able to get into the contest.
imagine like they make it big, and like they just blow the fuck up, and your whole job in the band is just to wear a bear costume.
Yeah, exactly.
That is fucking awesome. I would
That-
love that gig.
You would be Flavor Flav.
I'd be the Flavor Flav of that band. Yeah.
It's kind of like if you entered in the NPR Tiny Desk contest and you were in the video, but it's just a dancing bear and you won, you would have to go on tour as a dancing bear.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a cool role when it's like, yo, bro, you need to go tour around the country with us playing a bunch of shows as a bear.
As a bear.
It's just a
You're
bear.
going to go to every Chuck E. Cheese across the country.
Yeah.
So, we're turning tonight's podcast over to you, Shawn.
Oh yeah.
What do you got? Let's
You know,
hear
I
what
like
your
a little.
topic is.
I like the little specials we've been doing here, kind of passing it off. And I got a little special. It's you know, we've been doing a bunch of stories about shipwrecks and about you know, Joe brought up getting lost and then running into the water, and we keep doing a bunch of stories that are about bodies of water or running into water, something to do
Yeah.
with water. And that's where it kind of hit my head. Is I was like, you know, through all these stories though, I haven't heard any folklore.
Oh.
Like when the shipwreck
that's-
story happened on the island, yeah, there was a little bit there, and that's I'm like,
The cryptid, this
But that
cryptid
was
theme
real.
that's
yeah,
popping
yeah,
up
but I mean,
now.
and this stuff. But I was like, you know, with the recent shipwreck stories, I was kind of like, what about the part where all the guys on the island were like, hey, everything's cool here. We got our little fort. We got our this. We got our that. But just
don't
don't
go
go
out
to
there."
that side of the island because there's this crazy monster that'll kill you, and it happened to eat one of our patrons already.
Yeah, or also
Or
like the
don't fish or swim in this part of
Yeah.
the island
'cause
because
the
there's
big octopus will
the,
get
the
you.
octopus will eat you, you know, or like pirates going out and you know we talk about Blackbeard with his crazy beard and all that stuff, but I'm always wondering about what about the mermaids in the sea? What about the things that kind of change the morale of a lot of these stories? I feel like where a lot of these
people were pissing their pants on those ships
Well-
thinking about the Kraken.
Well, and keep in mind when you're shipwrecked on like an island, you have famine, you're hungry, you're tired, you're thirsty. You got to make all these things, so your brain is really going through a lot of stuff, which I think kind of starts ensuing some folklore a little bit. In that where it's like, hey, you know what? Don't go over to that side of the island. It's mostly because there's a bunch of poison ivy, but because you're so dehydrated and hungry and just trying to worry about living tomorrow, it now becomes the wildebeest of the, whatever and stuff.
It looks at you and stings.
So I wanted to bring up tonight a classic story of the Loch Ness Monster, which has been around for a long time. I'm sure we all know a little bit about it. But if you don't know much about it, or what the Loch Ness Monster is, it's a large marine creature believed by some to inhabit the Loch Ness, Scotland, and Loch Ness being the Lake Ness of Scotland. Now this has been talked about. This has been a talked about creature for a long time, dating back to ancient civilization. Now, I want to point out the first written accounts appear in a biography of Saint Columba from 565 AD. So, I mean,
Jesus
real early
Christ.
on, written down.
Like some dude was like, "There's a fucking monster out there," and that's not even a Scottish accent, but yeah, that's
Put it in the
crazy.
shrimp
though.
on the Barbie.
Yeah, no, and that's just the first written account. Before that, around the Highlands of Scotland, there's actually stone carvings in the walls and stuff of depicting this creature that inhabits the lake. And there was kind of this thing like the people, when they could only make hieroglyphs and stuff, were like, I think there's something in the lake we should maybe think about and put it in the history.
They were like writing alerts on the
so
rock walls, like chiseling it into the. There's a fucking monster out here. Like, just careful.
And what I like about this story is this story actually goes from ancient times to kind of current times from today. So from people carvings into rock walls to 565 AD, making a written gesture of it, all the way up to current times now in the 20 or the 2000s and stuff. And it's believed, this is what I think is kind of interesting, is through all this myth, it's been a big impact to Scotland. It's recognized that they make about $80 million a year off of just having
Just Loch Ness shit.
Loch Ness. So Scotland's economy is affected by a roughly, give or take, obviously some millions of dollars and stuff, around 80 million annually from the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, these. They're 100% trying to like raise a plesiosaur from dinosaur DNA to put in that lake. So they're like, see, it was here the whole time.
And
John
that's
Hammond, the
Oh,
dude
God.
from Jurassic Park, the old man, is actually Scottish. He's like, we're doing it to make a Nessie.
Yeah.
That was a much better
So,
Scottish
and I
accent.
do kind of want to throw that in there just a little bit, because through the thread of this story, there is some things we'll discover which will question whether or not we believe that this monster is real or not, which is kind of the point of, whether or not you believe that Loch Ness Monster is actually real or just an old story folklore type of deal. But the fact that it actually makes such an impact in the Scottish economy is kind of interesting to me, where it's like, well, Scotland's like not corn, not wheat, they're like, yeah, well, and I don't know where 80 million annually for the government or the country really falls in line with what's selling or actual resources and stuff like that comparatively. But it's kind of funny that they're allowing this to be a part of their society, where they're like, yeah, well, touristing, we make money off of Loch Ness.
There are other towns that do something very similar.
Yeah.
Like Lake Champlain has Champy.
Yeah, champion.
And like
Champy.
it's a very similar story to the Loch Ness. So,
No, and there's definitely
they
a couple.
love him too. He's like a little like pet. He's got like a little smile, and they put him on all the shirts
Well,
and everything.
That's right. I've forgotten about that.
So, and we do want to,
I'm from New York. I shouldn't have.
we do want to keep in mind they nicknamed the Loch Ness Monster Nessie, which I do think adds a little bit of, I don't know if it's feminine or I just want to say soft.
Nessie.
It's
Well,
Nessie.
It's Nessie.
It's real
Nessie.
friendly. It's considered a monster but it seems to be friendly in the naming of it, and this.
It's because it sounds like Betsy.
And the
Betsy.
Scottish want to kind of
Betsy
keep
is
it,
like
you
a
know.
cow name.
I got a question. Has anyone in history actually been mauled by
No.
this thing?
Oh, that's
Yeah, no, there's
You
no
know what I mean?
attacks. There's no attacks that I've found that are recorded that.
Would-
But I actually will
that
get to
seems
that.
to be a theme.
No, I'll get
for
to that.
cryptids, by the
So-
way, that have come up. Is that like Bigfoot doesn't actually attack people. Just kind of tries to spook you out.
So I do have.
Nobody's been mauled by Nessie.
Yeah, no,
That's where it gets into it being a mental or a physical thing.
well, and that's all I'll throw in a little bit here as we'll go through, because there is some encounters that kind of explain a little bit of like the style of Nessie, and how the character of this creature acts and how it's related to and stuff like that. So, the first written account of Nessie was in a biography of Saint Columba from 565 A.D., where it tells of a story that the monster bit a swimmer. So I guess there is one account, and it's the earliest account ever of Nessie in the loch.
But he's just a baby.
No, yeah, no, well,
Yeah, he's
He
baby
doesn't know what he's
all.
doing.
I'll bring up some of that later. We'll get into
Yeah,
that. But
I'm curious to hear the
So the-
like physical size.
Yeah, yeah.
And purported physical size.
So the story goes that by Saint Columba that he wrote down was that it bit a swimmer and was prepared to attack another man when Saint Columba intervened, ordering the beast, "Go back."
Go back to where you came from.
Oddly, the beast obeyed.
He just Gandalf.
He was just like, oh.
It is Saint what's his nose?
Saint Columba.
Saint
Yeah,
Columba.
Saint Columba just stood up and was just like, "No, you're not biting another one of my people. Yeah, no, I don't care. Back." And it obeyed, ordering the beast to go back. It obeyed. Over the centuries since then, only occasional sightings were reported, and many of these alleged encounters seem to be inspired by Scottish folklore. So it's, we have to take in old mine stories where it's like, what was that thing and that creature in the sea a little bit?
Yeah.
Which the Scottish folklore, which abounds with mythical water creatures. So a lot of Scottish culture seems to have mythical water creatures that are kind of fluid through that.
It's a marshland. Of course. They do.
The people that come out of like they're seals, or they could be people. What was that? What's that one? That's
Like
another.
mermaids and
It's like a mermaid, but
manatees.
it's not. It's
It's like
like
a siren, right?
no. There was a movie. I remember seeing a movie about it as a kid, and it's like what would happen is these creatures that were seals and people would come up to land and take their seal skin
Oh,
off.
selkies or something like that.
Selkies, right?
I
And
don't
would-
remember
And you
this.
could if you captured their skin, and they were all beautiful women, right?
Of course.
Obviously. Or, and if you captured their skin, and then they were your slave in a sense.
Kinky.
That's
I
That's
got that
interesting.
pretty
Alright.
close. Don't quote me, but that's what the movie was like.
that was
about.
awful.
Yeah, I never heard of that.
Yeah, I'm looking up right now to see if they are in fact selkies. Because, yeah, they are. The seal folk
The
are
seal
mythological
folk.
beings capable of therianthropy, changing from seal to human form by shedding their skin. They are, yeah.
Like water
Ah.
werewolves.
And is that a Scottish?
Scottish.
Okay,
Scottish
so
and Celtic.
that's on like. So they apparently have something with water, mythical
It's an
water
island.
creatures.
Yeah.
Like they like it. It
Yeah.
seems like they're interested in it. It's fun. Maybe I don't know.
You stare
Well,
out, you stare at the ocean a lot. You start building up some stories. Like.
Yeah, and it's the
Yeah.
ocean, and then it's also like a marshland, so like water's everywhere.
Well, now keep in mind that Saint Columba's account of the monster is only the first written account. Reports of a monster inhabiting Loch Ness date back, to ancient times, notably local stone carvings by the Pict.
Yeah.
Depict a mysterious beast with flippers. That's kind of what they were carving on the wall, was some mysterious beast with flippers. The Pict being one of ancient people who lived in what's now eastern and northeastern Scotland, which is generally where the loch is and where they're finding most of the accounts, is the eastern, northeastern
Yeah.
area over there. I did find I kind of thought this was neat. The Pict, their name, it seems, might refer to the custom of body painting or tattooing. Just a little side tangent. Considering it's believed Pict, P-I-C-T, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it actually right, comes from the Latin word picti, Picti, meaning painted. So the indigenous culture there, apparently,
They were just like slapping themselves with
mean,
needles because they
pikey?
were like, there's seal people out there.
Like
Yeah, I'm not sure of the
painted
pronunciation.
Scottish
Yeah.
warriors
Heard
is
of
kind of
pikey
like
before.
when you think like Scottish warriors, like William Wallace kind of stuff. It's always that blue paint, the Celts with the paint. Like they wore paint into battle, not armor.
Yeah, it's
That's smart. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll stop
okay,
it.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
stop
Yeah,
a
I've
sword.
heard rumors that they like
Psychological warfare.
They'd send
baby.
Berserker, like their version of Berserkers, in just chewing on a shitload of mushrooms. It'd be high as fuck, and they'd just be naked as fuck, running into battle like crazy in Berserk. And
The
like,
Vikings do that as well.
I don't know, but I know it's rumored that the Celts did. Maybe it's just one of those. The savages run in because they're savage, and they try to conquer us with their naked bodies,
Yo,
offending the Lord. You
I
know,
could see a huge, strong dude who knew how to already use all his weapons, who was tripping nuts on mushrooms and in like a blood frenzy,
And-
would
Yeah.
just be like
and
your
believes
worst
there's some
nightmare
mysterious
on an
beast
ancient
in the lake
battlefield.
with
You
flippers.
just
Yeah,
hope you'd
yeah.
have some archers around.
Right. And you're talking about people who believe in
we're
flippers.
defending Nessie.
All right, so obviously we can see that some form of a creature in Loch Ness seems to be a thread through history. I mean, it dates way back. It's obviously going from ancient times of Scotland. Now, before we get too far, I want to point out that there appears to be a monster or creature or beast seems to be based on some sort of actual encounters. For some odd reason, people are seeing something in the lake and they're writing it down. I don't feel like the ancients too much would be carving in the wall a beast with flippers in the lake if there wasn't something that seemed to at least ensue that thought in your mind. Regardless that there have been some questionable investigations reporting in more recent decades, it seems that this lake has something special about it. So obviously, like a lot of folklore, people are going to look into it and they're going to be like, chemtrails in the sky, I don't believe it. You know, like that's just how it's going to go and stuff. Some attractive and alluring quality that has been bringing people to lake for centuries seems to be kind of the more what I'm getting at is there's something luring about this lake, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the creature or if it's just the magnificent beauty of the lake. So I did want to take a time.
Probably a little bit of mysteriousness. Like here in Hayfork, we had
Let's see a
what,
picture of this.
what was that BBC show called? It was like they came out here looking for Bigfoot a couple years ago with fucking
yeah.
Oh, it was
Matt LeBlanc.
Top Gear.
Top Gear, yeah.
Yeah.
So like they're always kind of looking for that kind of crazy
Yeah, yeah.
shit. Plus, you got wingnuts that are out here that are like, Bigfoot's out here, I'm gonna find him. So I imagine there's something like that going on as well.
Well, and I do find it like interesting a little bit that it seems, Bigfoot's in kind of the redwoods area. Loch Ness is in this beautiful lake. It seems like a lot of these mythical creatures take place in a very beautiful area. You don't
to
hear
shit
about
on
like the monster
mean-
of the trash dump of New York or what, you know what I mean? Like it's just
They're
like
good hiding
Big
places,
lakes are
too.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Lake Champlain's also beautiful. I'm looking at pictures of Loch Ness right now. It's,
so yeah,
it's
with
a gorgeous, humongous lake
with
with
that-
like old castles on the
Yeah.
side.
yeah, with that in mind, I
That
wanted
fucking sounds terrible.
with that in mind, I do want to take a moment to talk about the lake itself so we can just get an idea of the surroundings and the surrounding terrain. Loch Ness lies in the Highland Council area of Scotland. It has a depth of 788 feet, 240 meters, and a length of 23 miles or 36 kilometers.
Jesus.
Loch Ness has the largest volume of fresh water in Great Britain. So it's the
Hell
biggest
yeah.
freshwater lake in
Right.
Great Britain at all. It's a pretty important lake when it goes to that. It lies
Is
in
it a reservoir as well?
I think they use it for a little bit because they've kind of started damming it up
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the surrounding rivers and
Okay.
stuff like that. So it lies in the Glen Moor or Great Glen, which bisects the Highlands. It forms part of the system of waterways across Scotland that civil engineer Thomas Telford linked by means of the Caledonian Canal, opened in 1822.
Okay, so it does act as a reservoir then.
Yeah, yeah. Now keep in mind though, with that they've kind of dammed up this lake, and at the time, way back when, there's not a lot of access to it. It's like you said, there's some castles around it, there's this and that, but there's not like a nice viewing route around the lake that everybody can go to the beach and this and that. You know, it's kind of secluded up in the Highlands.
There's some famous people that own some castles around that lake too.
Totally, yeah. That's why I'm like, I think it was kind of the
And a lot of it's like castles. What I saw was like castles, but they weren't. It wasn't like a big, huge castle. It was like part of a castle or like a guard tower turret, like outpost sort of building. That was clearly not still in use. It had fallen to ruin.
Well,
think it used
one
to-
just burnt down recently. Too,
Oh, I'm sure there was
like-
other ones. I didn't
Yeah,
look at like 100 pictures of the place,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah,
Yeah, no.
big lake in a valley, man.
So the watershed of Loch Ness covers more than 700 square miles, or 1,800 square kilometers.
Jesus fucking
Yeah,
Christ.
and comprises of several rivers, including the, I'm going to say this wrong,
Just fuck them up.
Oich, O-I-C-H, and the Enric. Its outlet is the River Ness, which flows into the Moray Firth at Inverness, I-N-V-E-R-N-E-S-S, Inverness,
Yeah.
which is kind of an
Inverness.
important town when it comes
Yeah,
to
it
the
sounds better
Loch
like
Ness
that.
monster
Inverness.
story.
We're gonna
You
get
have
so
to,
many
like-
Scottish people pissed off at us because we're pronouncing this shit wrong.
We apologize now.
No,
if-
we don't
No,
apologize.
cease and desist.
Yeah.
Yeah, cease and
Come at
desist
us.
me.
Come on.
Please send us an audio file of the the correct pronunciations of all these words that we are murdering, and we might forgive you.
Send them to fuckhobojohnson.gmail.com. Not at gmail.gmail.com.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so around the lake,
Never
there's,
get those.
or the lake also has seeches, which are surface oscillations caused by differential heating and are common in the loch. The sharp rise and fall of the level of the loch is one of the reasons for the scanty floor of the waters. Another reason is the great depths of the loch near the shoreline. So right by the shoreline, it's real
Super
deep. And then the levels kind of do this all the time because of the contributing, the differential heating with the rivers and everything around it. So it adds for a scanty. It makes it real, beautiful. I would say it's just like the water kind of has this flora and aura to it and stuff. And then the surrounding highlands, and
Hard to ride big boats in it. Like you can only ride smaller
and,
kind of.
and it's
rowboats
the
and
biggest
motorboats.
freshwater. So I'm assuming that it's pretty. Docks are probably hard to get in and out of. There's not a lot of fishing going on. There's not a lot of. As far as shore, maybe shore fishing, but people aren't running boats out there and trying to catch big catches and all that stuff. So it's a little bit of a secluded, really big lake.
So you're telling me, Freddie, foreshadowing, that there's a bunch of little mounds under the surface of the water?
I didn't take that into mind, but
I'm looking it up right now.
that's an interesting thought. Yeah. All right, I'll keep that into mind.
Put that in your back pocket.
I legitimately thought you were foreshadowing something.
I'm kind of foreshadowing the whole time, but that's irregardless. But regardless, this is just a pretty important lake to Scotland. We can kind of tell that it controls quite a bit. It's a lot of the little byways and flows, and obviously is a controlling area, especially for people building castles around the lake. There's some wealth involved. There's a lot of things like that. Well, let's see. It has rivers and canals connecting a large area of the highlands. For quite some time, this wasn't an easy area to traverse. It was really only consisted of forts and monasteries for a long time, notably Fort Augustus, with its monastery at the head of the loch. Roads were limited around the loch, so sightings, it seemed, were sparse for a long time. So not a lot of people going there.
It's hard to get to.
A bunch of rich people hanging out in their castles and their monasteries and, cool the lake and stuff like that. And we're not going out on the lake. We're just admiring it quite a
How
bit.
pissed off do you think the rich people are that people come to their lake and they're like, "Where's Nessie?"
Yeah.
I personally don't care. I hope
Yeah,
they're really
they can
pissed.
get
I hope they're
fucked.
really pissed off about it. I hope they're just like. I hope it ruins every Sunday tea for them.
Yeah, for real.
Seriously, fuck those people.
Cunts.
All right, so the legend really took off in 1933, though. So keep in mind, we're gonna
It's
jump a lot.
existed,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
gone back since before 565 AD, all the way up to 19. It was like, oh, cool, whatever and stuff. I think there's some folklore in that, but in 1933, it really kicked off. At the time, a road adjacent to Loch Ness was finished, offering an unobstructed view of the lake. So in 1933, they created like a main byway that went by the lake. You could see the lake. You could,
A82.
yeah, that's, It was
How
a
do you
huge.
know that, Sam?
I'm looking at Loch Ness on Google Earth.
It's a huge access for tourists or anybody else wanting to go to the lake now. Beforehand, that was kind of cut off. You had to traverse a little bit to get there. Now it's like, drive your car there and stuff. Or obviously date back to, whatever you're driving in Scotland at the time or however you're getting to the lake and stuff. It was a lot easier.
Horse and carriage. It's more reliable than this new modern technology.
Bagpipe jetpack.
You want to be my new scout band?
So in April of 1933, right after the road was finished, a couple, Spicer and his wife, report seeing an enormous animal, which they compared to a dragon, quote, dragon or prehistoric monster, end quote. And after it crossed their car's path, it disappeared into the water.
What the fuck?
No, so keep in mind they're driving this new road, and a dragon or prehistoric monster crosses their path, and then rides out into the water and is gone. And
So
stuff.
what's like? Do you know of the credibility of these
Actually, not a
people?
plesiosaur.
Are they?
Well, they're credible as in they've all these reports have been printed in a paper in Scotland, or they've been published. They've been documented and are made part of the history. So that's what I do want to keep in mind.
Well, that's also what I'm asking. Like, do we know anything more about these people, or is
So
the
this
report
is-
literally just like
Typical
man sees a thing in the street
Yeah.
and wife also sees it?
So this is where I think,
zoological,
especially in like way early
one person.
Scottish publications and a lot of newspaper, I don't want to just say Scottish, but anywhere, a lot of early publications, if you had a good story and you told me and I believed you because you're my friend,
Yeah.
I'm going to print it. And now
Well,
it
they were
becomes
They were also really big into what's the term for it? It's sensationalizing. When you're just like, there's a dinosaur crossing the street in Loch Ness. Come down and check it out.
well, and keep in mind too, this is right after the road opened. So they're looking for stories about the lake. They're looking for things like, oh, what's up with the new road? How's it been? And a couple's like, oh, I just had this crazy experience.
Dinosaur.
But I find it kind of funny and interesting. So apparently this water monster isn't bound to the water. That's what I kind of denoted from
I
it.
haven't heard that before.
Yeah, that's new to me.
Yeah,
So
that's
this is where I'm
cool.
like, it's
Yeah.
the Loch Ness monster, but it's been reported crossing the road.
Did they say whether it had hooves? Or...
No, so we'll get around to that.
All right.
Hooves?
Well, the dinosaur equivalent to hooves.
What I wanted to bring up is that it can get out of the lake and it can cross roads, which makes me wonder if it eats and where.
Embarrassing me on my own show.
How dare
Sorry.
We'll wait. We'll give it a second. Make sure everybody's on topic here.
There
All
we
right.
go.
Game face.
All right.
Running Nessie. I'm on it.
So, apparently, it can get out of the lake and it can cross roads, which makes me wonder what it eats and where it sleeps. For instance, does this creature eat and sleep in the forest or surrounding highland area, and just likes to swim in the lake?
Like to cool off, like a
Yeah,
bear.
maybe it's just nice and it's chill and it's
Oh,
cool, you
I'm
know.
little wolf.
Is this why also that it's been hard to find in the lake with all these people going out trying to find it? Because maybe it's just not even in the lake when they're trying to go fight it.
Fight it.
Or fight it, you know. Well, I'll get around to that later. Because some people go to fight this monster and some people go to see it.
I wanna
Freudian
see that.
foreshadowing.
The other thought I had is that maybe Nessie nests outside of the water. I can only imagine that this creature has to breed every so often, considering it's been told about since ancient times.
Yeah, and it brings up like the question: is it like asexual? Is it hermaphroditic? Are there other Nessies that we're just like missing out on?
Is this? Yeah,
I mean,
that's.
Can it fly?
Dude, that Komodo dragon at whatever
Oh, the zoo. Yeah.
just produced 6 viable female offspring without a partner.
So that's it
Some
kind
shit
of
like
brings
that.
up, and does the Loch Ness monster Nessie, does she breed in the lake, or does it breed in the lake or outside the lake? Which, because obviously it's going from the lake to somewhere else and it's hanging out on both ends, you know, is it like what's an amphibious creature that has to be in water most of the time but can go on land to do some things, but it has,
Sea turtles.
you know, that's what I'm like, maybe it's like got that
Yeah.
element to it.
Sea turtles don't move that quick.
Yeah,
and
for
sea
sure.
turtles mostly spend their time in water.
Yeah.
Well, this incident
Lived
was
for
reported.
hundreds of years, though. Well,
This incident was reported, and the Scottish newspaper printed the story.
What year?
I will, I think, get to that shortly, but I'm not sure off the top of my head right now. Well, you know what happens next. A bunch of sightings followed. So just
Oh.
like anything, the paper printed a story of a crazy sighting at the lake, and now everybody wants to catch a glimpse or have an interaction. New roads built, new sighting at the lake. Come see us. Yeah, you might see
So-
Nessie.
So it seems like it's leaning towards like it's a tourist attraction so that we can get people on our new fucking highway.
And that's I want to kind of leer into that a little bit. As much as I like the Nessie story, I will get at the end. We'll bring up whether or not you believe that old Nessie is real or not, because this is where it's an old folklore story or mythical creature comes in as like, is it true or not, based on the facts that we kind of know throughout the
Or
history of
maybe
it.
some like shitty businessmen were like,
Yeah.
hey, we can take advantage of this dinosaur drawing from way
We
back
actually
when.
haven't even touched upon what I think like. There's a whole other magic element to Loch Ness
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Oh, it's multi-dimensional.
That the
Like
what-
Bigfoot.
Well, we'll get into
yeah,
that. Let's
let's-
So before this story was reported, it seems that there were only few reports from St. Columba in 565 AD,
Yeah.
Alexander MacDonald in 1802. So we went from 565 AD to 1802.
Well, no, we went from 565 to 1939, and then back to 1802.
Well, no. What I'm saying though is before 1933.
Yeah.
There was only a few reports of it.
Yeah.
So really,
one of those
really, the history
Yeah.
of the Loch Ness monster started in 1933, and the reports of it beforehand there was only
I
a
see.
handful, which was St. Columba in 565 AD, Alexander MacDonald in 1802, stating he saw a large, stubby-legged animal surfacing from the lake and propelling itself within 50 yards of the shore where I stood. And in 1871 or 72, by D. Mackenzie, who reportedly saw an object resembling an upturned boat wriggling and turning up the water. The object moved slowly at first, disappearing at a faster speed. So we have St. Columba, we have, what we say, D. Mackenzie and
St.
Alexander
Columba, the guy who was like,
MacDonald.
be gone from me.
Yeah.
He just
Right.
Gandalfed him, okay.
That sent it off, and then two
You
other
shall not,
really
1300
vague
years
reports of a monster in this lake until 1933 when the road opened up, and
Yeah.
now we got this. I just saw this. So George Spicer and his wife, the couple that had the creature come
Yeah,
across
yeah.
the road there, described the creature, and it was printed in the paper as having a large body about 4 feet high and 25 feet long, with a long, wavy, narrow neck, slightly thicker than an elephant's trunk, and as long as the 10 to 12 foot width of the road. They saw no limbs. So that was the physical description that they put and
So it's a
was
snake?
printed in the paper.
Flippers.
Yeah, I guess flippers, but no limbs.
Yeah.
No, I think no arms and legs. Is
Yeah.
that makes? But
I
I'm
think
not.
you could have flippers without like.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
they're-
know if a flipper is considered
Flipper's
a,
just like a hand.
If it's outside, like.
but maybe not a limb, if that makes
I don't
sense.
know.
And
Well, and it's 1930 something.
Yeah.
They don't know what limbs are.
yeah, that's
Well,
on like.
or
and,
maybe if it's like wriggling across the ground, you're not gonna notice it. If it's like a seal,
Yeah.
like in the dark, would you necessarily notice like an elephant seal's front flippers
No, not really.
as like limbs,
Maybe.
looking like limbs in the dark?
Yeah.
With the
That's
shitty
questionable.
1930s headlights on your
in 19 in
fucking
19
Model A or whatever.
in 1930s,
you know,
everything was
Peugeot
a monster
version.
too. They were like porcupines
Yeah.
coming out.
They were drinking turpentine, saying it was like actually alcohol. So
Yeah, and they were on cocaine all the time.
so what I did want to bring up though, that's a pretty detailed description of Nessie. So never before this have we had like a detailed description. 1933, the road opens up, and now there's a detailed, within months, there's a detailed description of the creature in the lake. So we've finally established what the creature actually looks like, something we can keep an eye out for, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
A wriggling snake.
Yeah. It was on November 12th, 1933, that a man named Hugh Gray took a photograph near Foyers alleged to depict the monster. It was slightly blurry and had been
That's
and
the
had been
famous one.
no.
Oh.
We'll get to that one. This is the start of all that. It was slightly blurry and had been noted that if you look close, you can see Gray's dog in the water where he'd been fetching a stick while they were out on a walk. So apparently, Gray was out on a walk, threw a stick in the water for his dog, and then looked down and saw something crazy and decided to take a picture of it. The original negatives, though, were lost. But in 1963, Maurice Burton came into possession of 2 lantern slides, contact positives from the original negatives. He revealed it was actually an otter rolling around in the water.
That's
So
we can officially say there's evidence that we're contributing to the hype.
So now we got a description, we got a blurry photo. It wasn't but a couple weeks later in December that the Daily News commissioned Marmaduke Wetherell.
Whoa.
Marmaduke?
Whoa.
Marmaduke Wetherell.
That's
Wetherell.
not a
What-
dog.
Marmaduke Witherell.
Marmaduke Witherell. That is a fucking British name if
Yeah.
I've ever
Well,
heard one.
Yeah. So he was a big-time hunter, and he was commissioned. He was commissioned to locate the sea serpent.
No, he was commissioned to fucking shoot it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to hunt it and wear it as a trophy.
And commissioned by the Daily News. Keep in mind, by the
But the newspaper.
yeah. So
Newspapers for murder.
There's
Murder paper. Plug.
So along the lake shores, he found footprints that he believed belonged to a very powerful, soft-footed animal about 20 feet long. So he went out. He got commissioned by the newspaper on his travels and traverses. He stumbled upon some
I
footprints
found some titillating evidence
that
towards
that he believed belonged to a very powerful, soft-footed animal
there's a
about
very
20 feet
powerful,
long.
soft-legged, footed animal out there.
So I want to point
I
out,
plan
now we
to
got a
kill it.
description, we got a blurry photo, and we got reported footprints all in
All
1933.
the sensationalism evidence is lining up.
1,468 years after the
yeah.
initial sighting by
So, right,
Saint Columbo
and
or whatever.
right after the main access road opened up,
Oh, the main access
Right,
to the
right,
to
the
right.
previously isolated
Of
area.
course.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
So,
You know,
I do want to note, though, it was found out later by zoologists at the Natural History Museum. Upon closer inspection, I find this funny. Upon closer inspection of the footprints, they were determined that the tracks were identical and made with an umbrella stand or an ashtray with a hippopotamus leg as the base.
Whoa.
So keep
For
Great
sure.
detective. at
keep
the
in mind it was
museum.
like
for sure.
it was debunked. Dude got
Well,
like
no, it's not debunked. It could be a descendant of the hippo. We don't know.
no, like they figured it out. They were just like,
Well,
no,
that's
dude, check
funny
it.
that
Like
you should say that because at some point I want to bring up something that ties into this.
now in January of 1934, a motorcyclist named Arthur Grant, claimed to have merely hit a creature while approaching
Nearly hit a creature.
nearly hit a
Yeah.
creature. Almost. He just,
Missed it.
I mean, could have broke his collarbone like Taylor, but he didn't.
Nope.
And that
deer?
approaching Arbria, Shawn. I'm gonna say
That's probably the name
yeah.
of it.
All right, near the northeastern end of the loch at about 1 a.m. on a moonlit night. According to Grant, it had a small head attached to a long neck. The creature saw him and crossed the road back into the loch. Grant, a veterinary student, described it as a cross between a seal and a
Plesiosaur.
plesiosaur.
Right.
And a little side note that Nessie has been thought by many to be a plesiosaur, which is a marine reptile that went extinct some 65 million years ago.
Right.
And that's a pretty common thread
That's what science wants you
throughout
to think.
yeah.
Big science.
It,
We all know
big science.
it's a big demonic shadow.
And
That's what I think.
cut to commercial.
So, yeah.
Ah, no, stop! God damn it!
So with
Lauren
that
will no longer be on this podcast.
with that in mind, up to current now, up to 1933, that brings us up to what you were bringing out, one of the most famous photos that we've had, and that really unlocked and really ran with it and made the whole history of kind of the Loch Ness, which is the surgeon's photograph, the infamous surgeon's photograph. But with that in mind, we're going to come back to that after a short commercial break and talk a little bit more about the infamous surgeon's photograph of the Loch Ness Monster.
Dun, dun, dun.
This episode of Black Sheep and Bad Apples was brought to you in part by the following. Would be nice bed sheets. The Amazon is dying, but your comfort doesn't have to. Stay warm with Would Be Nice bed sheets. The Shy Bladder Foundation. Together we pee strong. Laws against bear paws. Too many bears shit in the woods. Laws against bear paws. Need a box? Order a box. It comes in a box when you order a box.
Boxes.
Take a Little Time Foundation. And by viewers like you. And now back to a little bit more of Black Sheep
Seriously,
and Bat.
whose fucking goat is this?
Oh. Who took the apples? All right, that brings us back.
Back again.
Back
Oh,
again.
Back again.
This part of the episode
We're
brought to you
gonna do one of these little things.
by Hazy Little Thing IPA.
Sierra Nevada
and-
here, bringing you hazy memories in the morning. We appreciate you, Sierra Nevada.
We think.
All right, so that's going to bring us back to the where we left off, the surgeon's photograph. The surgeon's photograph is one of the more it's probably the most infamous picture and, well, I guess I gave it away. Picture.
Black and white,
photograph
like the
gives it
upside
away.
down J one. That looks like an
yeah,
upside
yeah.
down J from far
It's-
away. Like,
It more or less looks like some dinosaur in a body of water, like just the head poking up, coming out like a long neck if it was swimming in a lake. That's how I've always kind of thought about it. It's
Loch
clear,
Ness.
it's not blurry, but it's not
It's
detailed, if that makes sense. It's
pretty
not like
blurry.
you're not going to get the color. It's a black and white photo. But for clear and shape and all that type of stuff, it's, for the time.
Yeah, and
I
again,
could-
it's like the quintessential,
This
like when
is the photo.
This is the photo.
yeah.
So the surgeon's photograph is reportedly the first photo of the creature's head and neck. It was supposedly
Supposedly.
yeah, there you go. Taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson, who was a London gynecologist.
At a London
gynecologist.
gynecologist.
London?
He's
No.
from London.
Oh, okay.
London.
The photo was published in the Daily Mail. Keep in mind the
Oh,
Daily
the
Mail.
Daily Mail.
On April 21st, 1934. So 1 year after the main access road to the lake was built and people could come more easily access the lake, a picture of the creature is taken, and it's a pretty clear one conveying the description of Nessie, the one we previously heard about. It's got the details that have been kind of depicted over the course of the last year.
Gosh, it looks like what everybody's been talking about. Perfect.
Interestingly enough, the London gynecologist refused to have his name associated with the picture, which led to it to be known as the surgeon's photograph. So because he didn't want his name attached to it, they denoted it the surgeon's photograph.
Even though he's just a gynecologist.
Okay, a quick side note. I thought it was really funny. The picture was dubbed the surgeon's photo after a gynecologist.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what surgery I don't know. In London, gynecologist.
Because you're not a gynecologist.
Yeah, I just when I think of a surgeon, I'm not thinking of a gynecologist. That's all I'm kind of getting.
I mean,
at.
it's long enough ago that like anybody's a doctor's a surgeon. Like
True,
the barber was still considered also a surgeon.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that's-
surgeon's a fairly fucking loose
It's-
term. You know, it's not like now you're like,
yeah. We
he's
got
a surgeon. You're
That's
like,
a
oh,
brain
that's two
surgeon.
extra.
No, this
years
guy
on
was
top,
a
gynecologist.
He had
Yeah.
surgery on.
Well, and that,
Did not yet.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where the AMA has been kind of American Medical Association. It was for a long time they just like kind of fucked off with like snake oil salesmen and people like that, where it's like, oh yeah, you went to college to study gynecology, great, that's awesome.
Gynecologist.
But you call yourself a surgeon? Yeah, I do surgery too. And it's
Right.
like, All right, fine. The AMA was just like,
Yeah,
scans.
I'll cut your the labia of your clitoris off. No problem.
That's what I was saying.
I'm
you
a
don't
surgeon
need
and a
degrees. No
gynecologist.
one will ever ask.
You need me
for
to
it.
look it down below and you're missing a finger? Well, shit, I guess that's two birds, one stone it. Yeah, that's so. Nevertheless, according to Wilson, he was looking at the loch when he saw the monster. He grabbed his camera and took 4 photos. Only 2 exposures came out clearly. The first reportedly shows a small head and back. The second shows a similar head in a diving position. The first photo became well known, and the second attracted little publicity because it was a bit blurry. So 1 out of 4, he got some snapshots
Good
off.
shots.
But so, what do you guys think of just the general? Now that it's been a year, now it's within a year we've had apparently a reported size and description of a monster crossing the road in front of a car. We have that Nessie's leaving footprints, and almost got hit by a motorcycle. Not to imagine that
What
it's
are these
also gotten a very descriptive photo taken of it, floating out in the water, all within a year of this main access road opening up.
What do these footprints look like? What kind of markings is it?
They look like
Like a hippopotamus marking, because that's where they came to the conclusion that it had to be something that somebody took a hippopotamus foot of some sort or another. Like apparently you can get those in Scotland back in the day, and started stamping it down the beach, and then was like, oh, look what I found. So, and that was a hoax. That was like, say, the Natural History Museum threw that out, but it did look like hippopotamus foot. So apparently it looks like it has hippopotamus feet. It's about 20 to 25 feet long, 4 feet high, with a neck about 10 to 12 feet long and a small head on the top of it, with possibly flippers or no actual feet.
Yeah.
And when it crossed the road, it was reported that in front of the car, or when it was crossing the road, that when it crossed the road and went back into the lake, it was just crushing all the underbrush below it and stuff. So when it went and slithered out into the bay, almost like maybe a seal or a sea lion would, it can't really walk and just leave prints.
Yeah.
It actually just was like no
could've
limbs
seen- yeah, I could
crushing,
see
but
that
then that's
going.
where the hoax came up kind of too. It was like, then we found footprints. Well, you just reported a large beast without limbs, and now there's footprints on the beach.
You know what the solution to that question is? Loch Ness Monster, the second one. Loch Ness Monster 2, Electric Boogaloo. His name's Bud.
Oh, and he got
Yeah,
like dancing shoes on, and
Yeah,
he's just
yeah,
dancing
shoes,
down.
yeah.
Like,
Well, an evolution of the Loch Ness Monster, that's what I kind of had to bring up earlier, was, does it nest or eat or sleep outside the lake? Because apparently it can traverse from in the water to out of the water. So for some odd reason, it goes in the water, but it also leaves the water. And that part's undefined. I haven't found any
That's why
information
there's 2 animals.
that says. So what I'm also kind of wondering, though, is if there's some evolution over time from ancient history to now, where from no roads in a lake in ancient times to there being people around in castles and monasteries.
got to be a little faster.
Yeah, what was-
like-
It's maybe it evolved over time like a lot of creatures did, and now instead of it having just flippers, it's got some feet to walk on because it needs to go.
What was St.
over there a
Columbus's
little bit.
description of it?
What's that?
What was St. Columbus's description of it?
His description was just like a large water creature beast. Let me go back. It just says a monster bit a swimmer and prepared to attack another one. So that's where in the old times, before 1933, it was really vague as far as there was just some large flippered animal in the water that was trying to attack people.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem obviously distinguished of it being some other animal that would make sense to be in a fresh body, large body water. So,
Man, I think there's, and like, so much of what we take for granted is the questions that you ask to like figure out the validity of something. At some point back in history, nobody knew that. That wasn't an idea anybody had.
and I do
And
like.
I don't know when that idea came up, but like,
And I do like to point out that there is some folklore to it, obviously.
Scientific
we can
method
kind of
is
see
a
that.
lot newer than fucking
Yeah.
But I don't
Saint
doubt, like I was saying earlier,
Boo
that
Boo or whatever his name
the
is.
people carving the pictures on the walls, there obviously was some new beast or creature or monster, whatever you want to call it in new terms, that was in the lake or doing something. And that's where I'm like, there is, I feel like, some small amount of truth, which is obviously where a lot of conspiracies or folklore or mythical things start to happen, because like a fishtail, which makes sense for this. A fishtail starts off with, yeah, there probably was some huge animal with flippers in the lake back then, but not
okay.
anymore, if that makes sense.
Lauren showed me the Pictish beast, right? And it doesn't really match any of these descriptions.
And that's
either, you
that's
know what
right.
I mean? Like,
That's why I
but
want to.
it's also from everything else. Like yeah, here's this thing, and then there's definitely a horse. That's definitely a horse, and then above that looks like a lion, maybe a person.
Yeah,
I mean, there were
so
totally lions in Europe, but I don't know if there were lions in Scotland.
no, for sure, and that's right. Okay, so old folklore to 1933, modernization of an area happens, type of deal. So this is a big year for Old Nessie, though. Keep in mind, 1933 to 1934. That's I mean,
yeah.
we like we said, sightings of crossing traffic, leaving footprints, almost getting hit by a motorcycle. Obviously has a problem with the new road.
Clearly.
You know what I mean?
Fucking
It is
clearly.
not dealt with transportation or traffic or anything in the life of this thing, and now it's obviously being like, what's this? Like a deer in headlights. I kind of feel like a little bit, and the news definitely is definitely spurring the efforts to prove the monster's existence. So the Daily News, the Daily Mail,
Daily
you know,
Mail,
yeah, is definitely like, hey, if you can find it,
Both
if
the
you can get a
Murdoch
picture of
family,
it,
right?
let us know. Well, for 60 years, the photo, the surgeon's photo, was considered evidence of the monster's existence. There was a lot of skepticism as well. Some dismissed the picture, as driftwood, an elephant, an otter, or a bird.
I like the idea of an elephant being in Scotland and nobody noticed that somebody taking it to the lake.
It's probably up there with like the Patterson Bigfoot photo as like the most famous cryptid photo like ever existed.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And that's what I thought was kind of funny. Is it's like who is taking an elephant? Because I don't think elephants roam Scotland.
Pretty sure no.
You guys might be wrong about that, actually.
Well, I mean, maybe
Maybe there's a couple
native elephant.
Yeah, you guys might be wrong
But
about
maybe
that.
I don't know
species
if
that we
they're
don't know
roaming the
about.
Highlands of
I
Scotland.
wish there was a way that we could
You
check,
know,
but there's
yeah,
no way
well,
to know.
if you
Just have to have faith.
if
You
you
have to
do
have
know
faith.
that elephants roam the Highlands of Scotland around the Loch Ness, or the Loch Ness of Scotland,
Yeah.
please
Limbless elephants.
Limbless
please,
elephants.
well, no, elephants, just in
in
general.
general, okay.
I just want to know if there's elephants, because apparently some people thought it was controversial, this photo, and thought it might be an elephant. And I'm kind of wondering why there's an elephant in the Loch Ness of Scotland swimming around. But,
I've got a bunch more questions.
for
but
a
continue.
later date. It was often the picture was often shown cropped. Keep this in mind, making the creature seem large and the ripples like waves. So when you take a photo and you bring it in, you don't see the whole surroundings. Everything seems a bit more exaggerated a little bit. While the uncropped photo shows the other end of the lake and the monster in the middle. So the original actual photo is of the entire lake, where you can see the surrounding highlands,
Yeah.
and then there's this little thing in the middle. But the crop photo, the surgeon's photo that we're all used to, that was published and all that stuff, is blown up of just the head coming out the water, and like we're not trying to look at the lake and the surrounding castles. We're trying to look at this monster in the lake. So some analysis of the photo fostered some doubt, but like say, not too much doubt. For decades after this, people have been trying to see Nessie, and quite a few more have captured some evidence of its existence. In 1938, a South African tourist, G.E. Taylor, filmed something in the loch for 3 minutes on a 16mm film. In 1938, as well, Chief Constable of Inverness,
Mm-hmm.
the Inverness Shire actually, wrote that the monster existed beyond doubt and expressed concern about the hunting party, which had arrived with custom-made harpoon guns, determined to catch the
Nice.
creature dead or alive.
No, they showed up with the harpoon guns, dead or alive though. They wanted
Yeah.
to take the.
He
They were
believed that.
shooting those harpoon guns no matter
Oh,
what.
they-
That's all they were saying.
But they were like, we're here for Nessie, Constable.
Yeah.
You know, and he was like, I don't know if you should go about that. And I said, yeah, I want to question the constable at the time, where it's just like, maybe you shouldn't be worried about a group of individuals showing up in your town with harpoon guns, trying to catch a possible creature out of the lake. Maybe you should
be
just
worried
worry
about
about a
the
group of
monster.
individuals
Oh, yeah.
or showing up in your town with a bunch of modified harpoon
No,
guns.
that
You know, I
that
don't know.
seems that doesn't scan.
Nevertheless,
What year
though,
is this?
1938.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
cares. One. Nobody gives a quid if they've got harpoon guns, son.
So the constable believed his power to
You remember the
protect
Great
them
Wall?
to protect the monster from the hunters was very doubtful. So despite what they said and everything else, he was like, I'm probably not gonna I ain't gonna stop this, and I just probably luring into what we were thinking is like, yeah, Nessie was a good cover up story or
Yeah,
whatever.
but now people with guns are showing up. We gotta fucking stop this shit.
Now jump to 1954. Sonar readings from the fishing boat Rival 3.
Oh.
The crew noted a large object keeping pace with the vessel at a depth of 146 meters. It was detected for 800 meters before losing contact. In 1955, Peter McNabb took a photograph that depicted two long black humps in the water. The photo was not made public until it appeared in Constance White's 1957 book on the subject. In 1958, it was published by the Weekly Scotsman.
So, you tell me the lake that's got a bunch of bumps under it also has a bunch of monsters in it.
That has a rising level of water, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but you know.
Okay.
In 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinzel filmed a hump, which left a wake crossing Loch
fuck.
Ness.
Oh, fuck.
Dinsdale described it as reddish with a blotch on the side. He said when he mounted his camera, the object began to move. He shot 40 feet of film.
What does that mean?
It was on tape.
It was only on film, so, you know, not like minutes these days on a little SD card. Back
Oh,
then it
I
was real
see.
film, so
Literally, it's like rolling film.
and I would have to look up how long a canister of film is for that relevant era, but I don't, that 40 feet, it's not a short amount of
what
film.
was it? 8 millimeter?
16 millimeter.
16 millimeter?
So 16 millimeter film, 40 feet of it. And that ain't cheap to develop either.
No.
We've all developed photos at the photo house and didn't like that we had to pay a lot for the 2 photos that came out of it at the time and this and that. So 40 feet.
Photos used to be super cheap to develop, dude. And there were photo fucking development places fucking everywhere, I swear to God. And then digital cameras showed up. And
All those places
10 years
became
later,
pretzel little shops.
yeah, they all became.
But
pretzel
developing
time.
film is definitely a lot more expensive, and especially back in the time when it was new.
Oh yeah, back for sure. That's true too.
So the next encounter I like is in 1977. Anthony Shields took some photos of Nessie, which are kind of considered some of the clearest photos that they've ever had of Nessie. While camping next to the Urquhart Castle, Shields, a magician and psychic, claimed to have summoned the animal out of the water.
Okay.
He
That's all
later
above board.
he later
Totally seems legit.
yeah. He later
Nothing weird going on.
he later described it as an elephant squid though.
Oh, right.
Claiming the long neck shown in the photo is the squid's trunk and a white
An elephant squid.
and a white dot at the base of the neck as an eye.
Okay.
Laker
So,
is
you're telling me
Elephant squid.
magician and psychic man. So he
Took
went down
one
to
of
the
notably
lake
the
in the
most-
70s, saw an
yeah.
elephant squid, and was like, this has got to be Nessie.
Yeah,
And
and
there's
I
no drugs involved.
yeah, I don't want to point out when
No-
the year
You
of
know who-
LSD may have came out and some relevancy in drug history according to the 70s, but in Scotland, I
This
don't.
seems like we could trust this
But
news.
you know, it's
Yeah, it
you know,
seems like
magicians, psychics.
reliable.
Right about
There is no animal recognized by zoology known as an elephant squid. There is a Dumbo octopus, which is super cute.
But right about that time, in the 70s in Loch Ness, Jimmy Page moved in. He bought one of
yeah.
the castles there.
I remember that he bought
Yeah.
a castle there and lived out his wizard life that he deemed when he was in Zeppelin.
He bought a house from Aleister Crowley.
Ah,
Oh, Jesus.
Aleister Crowley lived
See,
there.
this
for a
story just
while.
gets more and more above board. Like,
So,
we're
okay.
just verifiable facts.
so there
That
continued
dude's a creep.
there continued to be a lot more films and photos for years until 1993. In 1993, the makers of Discovery Communications documentary Loch Ness Discovered took a closer look into the surgeon's photo. The photo that has been keeping people believers for 60 years. When they analyzed the uncropped photo, they found a white object in every version of the photo. It was believed to be the cause of the ripples, as if the object were being towed, although it could be a blemish on the negatives. That's kind of still the add to the, we don't know if it's real or not, because that could just be a dot on some old negatives. More importantly, analysis, let's do that one.
There we go.
More importantly, analysis of the full photograph indicated that the object was small, about 2 to 3 feet long. So that uncropped photo to crop photo, where the ripples look big, and the this and the that, when they blew it up, they kind of did some math in the photo and was like, wait a second, it's not possible. That thing is literally 2 to 3 feet big. That's not a 10 to 12 foot neck. Since 1994, most agree the photo was an elaborate hoax.
Fake.
It has been described.
Faker.
It has been described as fake in December 1975, in the Sunday Telegraph article that fell into obscurity.
I like that the
So
Daily
in
Mail didn't publish
1975,
that.
in 1975, the Sunday Telegraph was like, "Yo, this shit ain't real. This photo's bullshit." But that article just disappeared.
The
It
Daily
just
Mail-
kind of fell in. It didn't disappear, but it fell into the box you're not going to open for
Yeah.
a long ass
Nobody
time.
noticed the article and was like, "Fuck it."
Exactly.
Back page.
Details of how the photo was taken were published in the 1999 book Nessie, The Surgeon's Photo Exposed, which I think is a really great name for that, exposing an old photo, exposed, which contains the 1975
Clever.
Sunday Telegraph article. The creature was reportedly a toy submarine built by Christian Sperling, the son-in-law of Marmaduke Wetherell.
You mean the guy
Now
with the
remember,
elephant?
Wetherell was the man who made the fake footprints.
Oh, Marmaduke. You scam.
Silly
Yeah.
little.
You silly dog.
Well, he had been
I knew he was gonna do it.
he had been publicly ridiculed by his employer, the Daily News, after he found the footprints were a hoax. To get revenge on the Mail, Wetherell perpetuated his hoax with co-conspirators Sperling, a sculptor specialist, Ian Wetherell, his son, who bought the materials,
Nice. So he's broke, and he's like, "Hey, son,
and
let
Maurice.
me borrow a couple bucks.
Yeah.
I'll put you on my project."
Yo, hey son, we're gonna have some fun right now. You got a job? You don't got much bills? Okay, hey, let's jump in on this. Sounds good, Dad. And Maurice Chambers, an insurance agent.
Wait a
I want to see him go up to like Shark Tank with this and be like, all right, I got a deal for you guys.
So that's what I'm like. I really like how they had an insurance agent on hand. He employed his son and a sculpture specialist, and then somebody just to make sure they didn't fuck some shit up and stay us in legal trouble. You know, like, hey,
Which the whole thing is legal trouble.
no,
Like it's just the whole thing.
So the toy submarine was bought from F.W. Woolworths, and the head and back were made from wood putty.
Fake news.
After testing it in local ponds, the group took it up to Loch Ness, where Ian took the photos near the Altsai
Yep, that's how you say it.
tea house. It didn't take long before they heard a water bailiff approaching. Duke Weatherall sank the model with his foot and presumably is still somewhere in the Loch Ness.
So the security guard comes over and stomps on the submarine. He's like, "Get submarine here."
Now keep in mind Duke Weatherall. It's another family member of Ian and,
Marmaduke.
and Marmaduke.
Oh,
Marmaduke.
damn.
Duke.
Yeah.
No. Duke
Oh, Duke.
is
Yeah, no, yeah,
Marmaduke.
okay, yeah, sure. And I
Yeah.
was just like, wait, where'd Duke come from?
Oh shit!
So yeah, Dad was just like, oh shit, cops coming, and stomped it out, put it in the
I see.
water, and they right after they took 4 photos, they were like, cool, get it in the lake. They got 4 photos of it, and then they were like, oh shit, stomp that shit
How's it
out.
going, officer?
Ugh. Hey, what's
What are you
going
guys
on?
doing?
Nothing here, nothing happening here. Now Chambers gave the photograph plates to Wilson, a friend of his who enjoyed a good practical joke. Wilson, or the gynecologist surgeon from London,
Oh right.
yeah, brought the plates to Oxton's, an Inverness chemist, and gave them to George Morrison for development. He sold the first photos to the Daily Mail.
Wait. Wait. I think we've heard that name before, haven't we?
It's just
Yeah.
a big fuck you to the Daily Mail.
So Weatherall got all upset for being ridiculed over a hoax, so he continued with the hoax and sold it back to the paper through a friend. Ultimate punk rock. He was like, "Oh yeah, you don't like this fake news?
Oh yeah.
Watch
this
this
guy
shit."
Marmaduke is a. I don't like him. So
And he was just like, "Yeah, I'm down with that."
This is how it went. This is how it really unfolded, and he's all pissed off about it. He went to this newspaper and was like, "I'm this hunter guy. I can catch this thing. Pay me to do it, and I'll give you guys the first dibs, you know, or whatever." And then went out and faked a bunch of shit.
My first clue was that he was a
To get
hunter
paid.
from London.
Yeah, a big hunter from yeah.
Well, if you know, big game hunting and shit, whatever people
Yeah, but
travel all over the place to
Apparently
shoot
they
animals.
shoot elephants and
Right.
hippopotamuses in Scotland.
Oh yeah, in
Right.
the 30s they were
Monster.
ruthless.
So then he gets caught and now he's
Yeah.
Was
Oh
he
yeah.
this was before there were anti-defamation laws.
No,
and
and
stuff.
it was
if the
like-
newspapers this guy's a piece of shit. Fuck him.
No, Andy kicked him
and
to
decides
like.
slander you publicly.
Andy,
that's
he
it.
didn't fire him. He just publicly ridiculed him. So he was like, "Yo, you're gonna be a journalist? No, now you're
Flame
sweeping the
war.
floor, and I'm gonna
Damn.
make fun of you in the next 5 papers."
And he was like, "Shit."
And just like ruined
know
his
what I'm gonna do.
reputation around town and all this other stuff. And he
Right.
was like, "Oh yeah, huh? You think it's funny I'm still sweeping your floors?
Was there
Watch this."
was there some story in there that he was like he's trying to bury the story?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure on that. So with that in mind, it explains that the photo was a hoax. But what I want to bring up is, what do you believe? Do you think the Loch Ness monster is real, or do you think it's just been an elaborate hoax and stories over the years? How much do you think that the toy submarine would be worth if you found it in the Loch Ness Lake, the original one that they made the hoax photo of with? And if the monster is real, what do you think it is?
Plesiosaur.
Plesiosaur, an otter cross, an elephant? And are there even elephants in Scotland?
No.
Well, and I think the real monsters in the story aren't the ones in the water. They're the ones taking the photos and perpetuating this bullshit.
Well,
It's just-
the people. Yeah,
the
people are the monsters.
Definitely,
People are the monsters.
people are the monsters. That's
But-
what we learn in every Scooby Doo episode. How often has Scooby Doo lied to you?
never.
That's true.
Yeah.
So what were the first two questions that you had? How much? Well, I remember how much is the thing worth? I have no idea how much the thing would be worth.
It'd be like getting the Bigfoot costume from the
Like-
Patterson photo.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, if that was like, if it was
No
fake
one would
and someone gets that, that would be a priceless. Like
nobody would believe that it was real if you found the thing anyway.
That's That's,
You know what I mean? And
like
so,
I found the toy submarine from the surgeon's photo. It's
so
like,
do I believe the Loch Ness monster
is real,
exists?
or do you think it's just stories over the existence of time and it's just kind of a built-up folklore?
You know, I am a scientist and I require proof that can be corroborated by more than one source in a public way. And none of these cryptids have produced any of this fucking proof, man. It's just like some stone carving that doesn't look anything like the description. It's but I'm also a bit of a molder, you know. I want to believe.
I do.
I want to believe.
I do want to.
So
who's to stop the dinosaur, or who's to stop like the universe from creating this thing that lived in the waters for a little while, and like the person way back in the day caught one little glimpse of this thing that could have been just a feral like a Scottish walrus or something, but either way it was some monster. And the dude yelled at it, and it went back into the water, and then it went extinct, and it sank to the fucking bottom and got buried by a bunch of other
Man
stuff.
and megafauna have coexisted.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs and man have not. But if anything was going to survive like an extinction level event, it'd be, something in the water sooner than something on the land. But I would say if it does exist, it's going to be something that you see is resembled in other ancient ways, not in. I want to see like stories that corroborate each other from peoples that have never met.
No, it's definitely
what I mean?
Scottish, and that's what I kind of wanted to bring up is this specific story. And I know there's similar water creatures in other lakes and things like that, but this specific story has to do with just the Loch Ness Lake and only in Scotland. It's a secular myth.
That's what works really well with it being a lake. But like the stories are very similar to our Bigfoot stories.
Yeah.
Where it kind of goes into the folklore and kind of blends in. It's kind of hard to see what's truth and what's not.
And you find this like these legends or like myths in multiple cultures especially for the Bigfoot Yeti thing. There's more Bigfoot-esque cultural cryptids in ancient mythos for indigenous peoples than any other one.
Yeah.
But there's a whole ton of them.
Unless you're talking about the ocean, and then you talk about the Kraken and things like that. That's been in our
Kraken's
history.
That one's easy, man. Like, they're a gigantic freaking squid.
Yeah.
They're a huge squid. And boats used to be really stinky. Wooden corks. They're covered in dead animal stuff, right? And what do these giant squid eat? They'll definitely eat a dead carcass floating in the surface of the water. You find them all the time on like floating carcasses.
But that's
so of course it's going to come to the boat. It's
true.
going to come up to the boat and try and eat the boat. It's got a beak. Inside, its mouth is this beak that's like a foot long almost, and so it's going to take big chunks out of the side of a boat before it decides I don't want to eat this and fucking swims off, or you stab it a few times and it leaves. That's not a cryptid. That's just people misunderstanding.
Well, it was at one point.
So do you before we get too tangent, what do you think, Joe? Do you how do you believe in the
I believe it's
Loch
something
Ness
else all
monster?
entirely. I believe it's the story that I like a lot is from Aleister Crowley living in Scotland, and the story goes that he was supposed to do a 12-month ritual, and only got through 6 months of it and quit, and tore a hole into the fabric of reality and like let these creatures loose. And this is also the time where he drew the big alien head that like looks a lot like a lot of the alien grays, and this is right about the time where you start seeing the progression of Loch Ness getting a lot more sightings. So I think it was a site that had some power from back in the day, and he heard this, so he took all his money and moved out there and started playing around with weird rituals and kind of did something a little fucked up.
Yeah. So
But it kind of just sounds like a good comic book,
He
too.
released the Ancient Ones.
The
Sounds
ancient
very
ones. Lovecraft.
Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
So
It's a Cthulhu. It's not a Kraken.
So I guess before we conclude, I just want to leave my little thought on the Loch Ness monster. That maybe. Did you? Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I kind of think that it's mostly sensationalism, but I also leave a whole lot of room for like it kind of just being, like, as I explained earlier, like maybe there's something there or that existed there at one point and is no longer there. Like the world is a fucking mystery, and we're discovering new things about everything every day. That's why I like some of these cryptids. Like I love the journalistic aspect of like having evidence, having people who are honest and reporting verifiable facts. I love all of this, and so like cryptids for me are always still going to be like just a man. I hope we get it one day, because I personally hope and think they're out there. I just can't verify that.
So I kind of feel the same way. And any final thoughts before we go? All right, so the one final thought I want to leave with is maybe the Loch Ness could be real or is real. I'd like to believe that it is real. Maybe at the time when Scotland was making $80 million a year, it was very employable to believe in the Loch Ness monster regardless of whether or not it was real, but the current attention that brought to it in 1933 and past, since centuries before that, scared it. And it had to leave the Loch Ness, taking some of all those rivers that leave an outward and traverse into the other parts of the Highlands. So maybe the Loch Ness is still out in the Highlands, but it's not the Loch Ness monster
maybe
anymore.
It migrates.
Yeah. He can go in and out of of the lake. He can cross roads. Maybe the next lake's just across the street.
And got a little too busy, went to the next one.
Yeah.
Well,
The beach is getting a little too public now.
If you
you
look
know?
at the topography, the Loch Ness is located in like this fold that goes from one side of Scotland to the other, like in a pin straight line. It's just this valley the whole way, and there's several smaller lakes that are basically the same width as the Loch Ness, but just shorter.
Yeah.
You know, some distance away. I didn't really look to see how far away they were, but it's not an outrageous distance for an animal that
Can go in.
creature that, you know, has purportedly existed for 1400 years,
Yeah.
1468 years.
Yeah.
And if it's a plesiosaur before 65 mil.
I mean, it's millions of years. But it could be, you know, anything. It could be there's a very similar sounding thing from Africa that's like,
Oh yeah, I saw.
but has like elephant feet,
Yeah,
right? And so like, and that head.
yeah, that craning neck with the tiny little head at the end of it.
The translation of its name, which I'm not even going to attempt, because it's in Lingala, is the one who stops the flow of rivers. So it's this big, huge thing.
Snorlax.
With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and conclude
Snorlax. Nailed it.
tonight's episode of Black Sheep and Bad Apples about the Loch Ness Monster. If you have any comments on how you feel or if whether or not you believe in the Loch Ness Monster, please send them to Black Sheep and Bad Apples or snail mail it to P.O. Box 364, Hayfork, California. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us.
Fuck Hobo Johnson.
Fuck Hobo